Hello, welcome to this pronunciation panel on preparing teachers to teach English pronunciation skills. You're going to listen to 3 recorded presentations from 3 experts in the field of pronunciation teaching, Dr. Sinem Sonsaat Hegelheimer, Dr. Verónica Sardegna, and Dr. Susan Spezzini. After these recorded presentations, they're going to be live to answer any questions you may have. So stay on and ask your questions to the experts. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first presentation of this panel. My name is Sinem Sonsaat Hegelheimer, and I'll be talking about the role of pedagogical training in evaluating L2 pronunciation and providing corrective feedback. You see a brief overview of my talk about the importance of corrective feedback, teacher training, and preliminary findings of my corrective feedback research. Research shows that pronunciation instruction is effective, but it also shows that it can be even more effective with corrective feedback. Corrective feedback has a great value, but providing it is a challenging task, especially for teachers who are not trained to teach L2 pronunciation. Research shows that teachers are not always confident in evaluating and assessing pronunciation skills. Some teachers do not even address pronunciation unless there's a very serious communication issue. And oftentimes, pronunciation feedback is limited to particular pronunciation features, mostly segmental features. So the importance and the value of metacognitive instruction in assessing pronunciation and providing corrective feedback should be emphasized in teacher training programs. Training pre-service English teachers to provide corrective feedback in L2 pronunciation instruction is a very important goal for us, and we could achieve this goal through peer corrective feedback practices in the courses that they take in their teacher training programs. Peer corrective feedback practice would help prospective teachers not only for their own pronunciation skills as L2 speakers, but also for their teaching skills for their future students, for their future practices. We know that peer corrective feedback may have some drawbacks, such as accuracy and quality issues, but we also know that corrective feedback can have great benefits for prospective teachers. They might be more facilitative and they might be engaging more in their corrective feedback exchange sessions, and they may notice their pronunciation errors more clearly. They may do a deeper processing of their own interlanguage skills. So corrective feedback could be very influential for their teaching skills. In this study, I'll be talking about an online teacher training course for pronunciation teaching. And in this course, there were 10 pre-service EFL teachers who studied at a large public university in Turkey. These students had already received listening and pronunciation course in a previous semester. And as part of this online teacher training course, they got more training on pronunciation content knowledge, including both segmentals and suprasegmentals, and also pedagogical knowledge and practice. In this course, they also discussed a lot of key readings, key concepts. They did 2 self-assessment tasks for their own pronunciation skills. They did written peer evaluations and oral peer feedback sessions with a partner in their class. They also wrote reflective journals to think about what they did during these evaluations. There are 3 research questions of this study. And the first one is, what are the changes in beliefs and attitudes of pre-service teachers regarding the goal of L2 pronunciation instruction and teaching priorities as a result of this teacher training course? The second one is, what are the effects of teacher training in pre-service teachers' practices regarding the pronunciation features they address in corrective feedback they provide, and the quality of feedback they produce in these peer corrective tasks? And the last question is, what is the nature of interaction between peers during the oral peer corrective feedback sessions? You can look at the details of the online teacher training course on this slide. You can see when students worked on segmentals and suprasegmentals and when they did self-evaluation assessments or peer evaluation tasks. You can also see the flow of activities in a more detailed way on this slide so that it can give you an idea when the first peer evaluation happened, right after segmental features, for instance, and when the second peer evaluation task happened, right after suprasegmental features were addressed in class. The data collection tools in this study include surveys with open-ended questions, written peer evaluation tasks, oral peer feedback sessions in pairs, self-assessment tasks, and reflective journals. And when I say peer evaluation, I mean listening to one of the 4 model speakers that was provided on the course website and comparing their peers' pronunciation to one of the model speakers to provide feedback for 10 different tasks, including controlled and free speech tasks. In this study, I will be reporting on the surveys and oral peer feedback sessions only, because I am already analyzing the data and these are my preliminary findings. In another study at another conference in the future, I'm also planning to present about the other components of the data. The data analysis is qualitative in nature because I analyzed the survey responses and I also analyzed verbatim transcriptions of peer feedback sessions. So basically in these peer feedback sessions, I looked at the content analysis, I looked at the teaching features the pre-service teachers addressed, the use of meta language they had, the clarity of feedback and interaction between the peers. When we look at the results of the study, remember the first question was about the changes in their beliefs and attitudes, the beliefs and attitudes of pre-service teachers for the goal of pronunciation instruction. And at the beginning of the class, these teachers focused more like on native speaker accent or accuracy issue as a target for pronunciation teaching. Some students also mentioned intelligibility and comprehensibility, but only one student mentioned intelligibility as the goal of pronunciation teaching by itself. However, at the end of this course, more students started to talk about intelligibility as being the ultimate goal of pronunciation teaching. In fact, 7 pre-service teachers named intelligibility as the goal of pronunciation instruction. And I would like to share some of the quotes from their surveys, survey responses. As you can see in this example, it says, after taking this class, I realized that there are some misleading courses out there that try to change the speaker's accents. Instead of trying to correct someone's accent, we should focus on their intelligibility. The second component of the first question was about teaching priorities. And when you look at the findings of the survey at the beginning of the semester, you can tell that some pre-service teachers said, I have no idea what are the teaching priorities in a pronunciation course. Some said suprasegmentals, 1 person said segmentals, and 3 students said, pre-service teachers said both futures. But at the end of the semester, as you can see, 7 pre-service teachers said both futures are important. This is the answer that we want. Both segmentals and suprasegmentals are important. And if you look at one of the quotes here, one of these pre-service teachers says, I think both of them are equally important and necessary because errors in any of them can lead to misunderstanding and unintelligibility. When we look at the second research question, pronunciation features that pre-service teachers addressed in peer feedback sessions, you can see that there's a significant difference between the peer feedback 1 corrective feedback session and peer feedback 2 session. So these light blue ones represent the first peer feedback session and the darker blue ones represent the second peer feedback session. And as you can see, students who are pre-service teachers, they address more of everything, more vowels and consonants, more word stress issues, prominence and intonation. And you can see how each one of them increased really much as a result of the teacher training that they've been getting throughout the course. And the results of this chart that you're seeing on the screen right now is based on the explicit use of the pronunciation terms rather than just the qualitative data analysis. When you look at the quality of feedback that pre-service teachers provided, what we can tell based on the qualitative analysis of the data in peer feedback sessions, we can say that the first peer feedback session had more vague and uncertain feedback. And the peer feedback 2 session had clear and certain feedback compared to the very first one. And remember, they kept learning more content knowledge as they went by, and they also discussed more key points of L2 pronunciation teaching in the course. And I would like to share some of the quotes from the qualitative data analysis of the quality of feedback in peer feedback sessions. These quotes are from the peer feedback session 1 about the vagueness and uncertainty of the feedback provided. So if you look at this example, for instance, it says, in the 8th sentence, you pronounce the phonetic as it is in the Turkish version. I think you pronounced it with the harsh T. So as you can see here in this example, the pre-service teacher is using an alternative term rather than a pronunciation term. Or here, you can see that the pre-service teacher says, and there was this bird and girl, and I don't know if it was an error. So you can tell that the pre-service teacher is not very sure in this quote, so they're doing some kind of hedging. Or in this other example, as you can see, the pre-service teacher said executed, kind of had that like very sharp K sound. So again, using alternative terms rather than meta language, rather than pronunciation terms. If you look at peer feedback session 2, the clarity of feedback, we can see from these quotes that teachers made some progress in terms of the feedback, the quality of the feedback they provided. So for instance, in this first example, the participant says, I've been only abroad just once in my entire life. It was Britain. There was unnecessary rising speech intonation again. When you say Britain, the listener expects the sentence to continue because of the rising speech intonation. So as you can tell from this example, the pre-service teacher was really efficiently able to talk about the functions and form of intonation in English. Okay, so and then in this other example, the pre-service teacher says, there are very few little instances, but they're more individual rather than they don't apply to every single vowel and consonant. So as you can see, the teacher started to create some overall feedback, more sophisticated feedback, saying you have this one instance here, but it doesn't apply to your overall speech. When we look at the third research question, the nature of interaction during peer corrective feedback sessions, what I could tell based on the qualitative data that there was active engagement during peer feedback sessions, especially in the second corrective feedback. And there was simple recognition of feedback and approval more in the peer feedback session 1, but there was more like questioning and opposition in the peer feedback session 2, because all pre-service teachers started to be more confident in questioning each other of the feedback that they were providing. So another thing that I noticed that there was a lot of constructing knowledge together. The peers were working on their pronunciation issues together by asking questions back and forth. And there was a lot of self-reflection and empathy, self-interlanguage development signs. There was also L1 group reflection a lot in the peer feedback sessions. So students / pre-service teachers talked about what Turkish speakers typically do when they speak in English. Here are some quotes from the nature of interaction. So if you look at this one, for instance, this is a clarification request from the partner, from the peer. It says, may I ask a question? And the partner says, of course. For the last task, was it no stress or not enough stress? So this is a really nice question for a student to ask. And the partner says, not enough stress. It was too monotonous, okay? In another instance, you can see that the peers were constructing the knowledge together, and actually they were questioning the reliability or accuracy of the feedback. So here in this one, they're talking about how to pronounce bungee jumping. Is it bungee jumping or bungee jumping, okay? And then they started to question which one was the correct one. And here the student says, I'm gonna check that later, by the way, I don't trust you. And they start chuckling here. And then the other student says, fair enough. I mean, how can you know I'm the correct one? You're making me doubt myself. So you can see that they're just thinking about what is the correct version really, okay? And then again, there was a lot of empathy and self-reflection. A lot of times students said, oh, you have this pronunciation error, but I do that a lot too. Or I think we both made this mistake. Or I think all Turks do this kind of mispronunciation. So there was a lot of that going on, which shows that pre-service teachers do not only think about their partners while they were providing this feedback, they were also comparing them to themselves, their own pronunciation. So if you want to create some conclusions out of this, we can tell three main things. Pre-service teachers in this study believe in the value of intelligibility more than they did before the beginning of the class. And they see intelligibility as a more important goal of teaching at the end of the course. The second conclusion we can make, pedagogical training helped pre-service teachers address both segmental and suprasegmental issues more as they learned more throughout the course. The feedback teachers provided seemed to be deeper and richer in terms of quality. And teachers used pronunciation terms more confidently in peer corrective feedback too. And they kind of used the hedging words less frequently because they started to be more confident of what they were saying about their peers' pronunciation. And lastly, we could say that there's an active engagement and self-reflection going on in peer corrective feedback sessions. And this might be actually helpful for pre-service teachers' own pronunciation skills and interlanguage development. So this brings us to the end of this presentation. There's so much more about this study. Hopefully I'll be able to share those with you guys in further studies, but I would be very happy to answer any questions or address any comments throughout the live Q&A session. See you later. Bye.
Hello, I'm Verónica Sardegna from Duquesne University, United States. And in this second panel presentation, I'm going to talk about the role of the teacher in supporting English pronunciation learning. First, I'm going to discuss the purpose of teaching pronunciation, and then I'm going to share an empirically based pronunciation model for teaching English pronunciation. The focus of today is the role of the teacher in supporting learners' self-regulated efforts. So why is it that we teach pronunciation? Well, intelligibility in English speech is integral for English language learners' successful comprehension and communication with both native and non-native speakers of English. Thus, it's crucial that we learn more about how we can help our students improve their comprehensibility and intelligibility. By comprehensibility, I mean how difficult it is for the learner to understand the spoken message. And by intelligibility, I mean to what extent the learner's spoken message can be understood by others. My research findings show that improving L2 speech intelligibility takes time and largely depends on students' self-regulated practice choices and efforts. It really depends on what they do with what we teach them and how much they practice with the resources that we provide. Also, their practice choices and efforts are closely linked to their self-efficacy beliefs and their motivations and attitudes towards pronunciation practice. Do they think they can improve? Do they want to improve? Do they want to invest the time and effort required to improve their pronunciation skills? The answers to these questions will dictate how much effort they put into practicing. Also, my research findings highlight the integral role of teachers in creating learning environments and opportunities that promote and support learners' self-regulation, self-teaching, self-assessments, and reflection on learning. So today I'm going to share with you a pronunciation instruction model that guides teachers into supporting students' self-regulated practice choices and efforts. The first and the most important thing is that the teacher must have expert knowledge of what to teach. The teacher needs to know what pronunciation features, what rules, what strategies the students need to learn in order to improve their intelligibility. Also, the teacher needs to have pedagogical knowledge on how to teach these things to the students. But expert knowledge and pedagogical knowledge is not enough. The teacher also needs to purposely engage in 7 teacher actions that will support students' efforts at learning. These actions will help the teacher promote learning through information, for example, or support learners by providing resources and guides and models that they can copy. Also, the teacher needs to create opportunities for practice inside the classroom and outside the classroom, and be sure to empower learners through information via strategies and also ongoing and frequent feedback. But let's discuss these 7 actions one by one. The first action is to raise the students' awareness of what pronunciation features they need to improve. This will promote learning. Oftentimes, our learners come to our classrooms with problems such as not pausing accurately. They may pause at incorrect places or run through expected pause boundaries. They often misplace pronunciation phrase stress by stressing given information instead of new information, or stressing all the words in one utterance, more or less equally, without one prominent stress. And We do know from research that irregular chunking of phrases, what we call irregular pausing, affects listening comprehension, makes note-taking difficult and frustrating. We also know from research that prominence in English is critical to meaning. It highlights what's new, important information. It contrasts information. It places a special emphasis. So students do need to know how to pause within phrases appropriately. How to pause appropriately, and how to use prominence in English to convey their intended meanings. Oftentimes, we also have learners that link sounds incorrectly or use discourse markers in a way that does not orient learners to how ideas are linked to one another, or simply do not use discourse markers at all. And we do need to use discourse markers to frame illustrations or examples, or provide warning before moving on to new topics and things like that. Research on these features show us that absence of linking affects our intelligibility because it renders English speech choppy and disconnected. It causes frustration to the native speaker listener. We also know that discourse markers facilitate discourse processing and increase chances of ease of interpretation. So it's very important that we do teach students how to link sounds within and across words appropriately and use discourse markers in a way that facilitates discourse processing. So once we raise the students' awareness of these features that they might need to improve, we need to help them prioritize their learning goals. So we have to provide them an assessment and then decide what features are affecting their intelligibility. For example, are they stressing policy-level words appropriately? Are they chunking and stressing phrases correctly? Do they need to improve their fluency by working on redaction or linking sounds? Or it could just be a matter of improving their intonation in order to convey the appropriate meaning through contrasts, questions, lists, new versus old information, and so on. And overtly mark discourse moves to facilitate the understanding of their message. It could be they need to work on all of these or some of these things, but we do need to help them prioritize their pronunciation learning goals so that they can be successful. So they can't work on everything at the same time. We have to assess them and decide what is it that they need the most. Then, after identifying their learning goals, we need to teach them explicitly the pronunciation features, rules, and learning strategies that they need for their practice and their self-teaching. And this is going to be our way to support learning. For example, some pronunciation learning strategies can be things like practice word stress alternations using rubber bands or gestures, or read the phrase aloud using backward buildups. These are production strategies that help them with speaking. But we can also teach them prediction strategies that help them figure out how to pronounce phrases and words. Things like use spelling rules to decide which syllable to stress in a word, or what sound to produce and link, or use contextual cues and given information to determine the most prominent word in the phrase. Another type of strategy is perception strategies, where students listen for stress or listen for things that they need to improve. Things like listen to how stress is used to contrast information and to organize information and imitate it. Or listen and discriminate between sounds using minimal pair words. And of course, there are many more strategies like this that you can teach them. But we need, after we teach them all these things, we need to assign activities where the students can practice their sounds, words, and phrases using pronunciation learning strategies in private. And this is what we call in-covert rehearsal. The covert rehearsal model is a self-directed process. Remember, we're talking about self-directed, self-regulated learners. So students need to find privacy, perform aloud, read aloud the words, the sounds, and the phrases they want to improve, monitor their performance, and self-assess whether they are correct or not. Most of the time, one way of assessing is comparing the performance with other speech models that we can provide. And then they have to practice in order to change their performance to match those models, and then practice the changed performance until they are fluent. And this they can do with one sound, a word, phrases, until they match their targets. Now, it's not enough to give them practice opportunities. We also need to scaffold their learning. And this is what we call action number 5. The teacher needs to support students' practice with guided activities, online resources, and ongoing and frequent feedback. It's very important that we ask ourselves, what are my students doing well? What can they do better? How can they improve, so that we can determine what is the best way to help them. Do they need more information? Do they need to learn more how-to strategies? Is it practice that they need? Once we determine that, we can help them with resources and feedback. This takes me to action number 6. It really is not enough to provide feedback and tell them, you're doing great, you're improving, if a student doesn't believe that he or she is improving. We need to empower them. And one way of empowering them is to build their confidence by improving reflections on learning. So if you ask your learners, what worked, what didn't work, what should I try next? And they looked at video recordings at the beginning of the semester, and then after practicing, they record again and they see improvement. This will increase their self-efficacy. And we do know from research that increased self-efficacy leads to greater improvements, because when they believe they can improve, then they're engaged in more practice in order to continue improving. And this, of course, long-term will create greater improvements. The last action has to do with what happens at the end of the course. In all the courses that I investigated, the students using this model improved significantly from time 1 to time 2, which is during the course, the 4th month of instructions. But then after the course, they tend to decrease a little bit in their accuracy, and then the plateau. Students in this course that were tested for their improvements with supraexamental features, word stress, phrase stress, and linking improved significantly during the course, went down a little bit, and then the plateau. And this is repeated, is a trend that is repeated with other features as well. The important thing is that by time 4, there is a large improvement that students have maintained from the beginning of the course to the end, to 34 months after the course. So the model works. What happens is that students need new priorities. Once they achieve the priorities that we gave them during the course, it's important that we set new learning goals for their future practice, so that they can get the information they need, the awareness that they need to continue working on their pronunciation skills, which will help them increase again, go down again, and plateau. So today, I have shared with you a pronunciation instruction model that focuses on what the teacher can do to help students self-regulated practice efforts and learning. The teacher must have expert knowledge and pedagogical knowledge, and these will help the teacher promote learning through 7 actions. Actions that have to do with providing information and explicit teaching, the sounds, the words, and the phrases students need to learn, as well as the rules and strategies that they can apply to figure out how to pronounce such words and phrases. The teacher needs to support students' learning through guided practice and models that students can use for practice. The teacher has to create opportunities for the students to practice inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and with specific guides and models. And also the teacher must empower learners by increasing their self-efficacy through frequent and ongoing feedback and with opportunities for the students to reflect on their learning. If you want to know more about this model that enhances learning, there's an article that is coming out in Language Teaching that talks about this model and the empirical validation of the model. The research that validates this model is discussed in this article. It's now in press, but it's coming out soon. And you can also consult some of the references that I cited during the presentation. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have questions, please stay on. After our third presentation, we're going to be live answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the third part of our pronunciation panel. My name is Dr. Susan Spezzini, and I teach at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. My part on this panel is helping English learners perceive and produce challenging English vowels. I will give a brief comparison of the Spanish vowels and English vowels. I will describe challenges for Spanish speakers with perceiving and producing the two high front English vowels, such as in beat and bit. I will explain how to help Spanish speakers perceive and produce the high front English vowels as distinct phonemes. While I'm presenting, think about whether this challenge is a listening situation, is speaking, or perhaps is something else. In Spanish, there are 5 vowels: I, E, A, O, U. And these 5 vowels are almost the same in all of the different countries. And there are also some diphthongs, but in this presentation, I won't be going over the diphthongs, just these 5 vowels. In English, we have many more vowels, and they're very different from country to country and within regions of the same country. I'm going to be looking mainly at the North American English vowels. This is the way that I teach this to graduate students who are preparing to be ESL teachers. In these classes, we also have K-12 teachers in elementary and secondary schools who are learning how to better help the English learners in their classes. And most of their classes have Spanish speakers. There are 4 tense vowels. There's the E in beat, the A in bait, the U in boot, and the O in boat. And this is the 3x3 matrix that we saw in the previous slide. Now there's 7 lax vowel phonemes, and lax being that the muscles of the cheek are lax, and tense being that the muscles in the cheek are tense. And so we have bit, which is also high front like beat, but it's lax. So there's a little dotted line there. There's e and bet, mid front like bait, and there's a dotted line to show a difference. There's a and book and a dotted line to show that it's different from the u. And then there's but, and this is back, mid back, but at times mid central. So it's like on the line there. There are 3 low vowels that are lax. There's and bat on pot, or and bought. That last vowel is not part of my repertoire, linguistic repertoire. I'm from California, but the ba and bought is what all of my graduate students use in their a variety of English. There's a schwa in the middle. So these are the 12 vowels of North American English, and that I'll be comparing with the Spanish. I'm using modified IPA fonts in order to represent these vowels as being different from the Spanish vowels. And there are also diphthongs in English, but we're not looking at diphthongs in this presentation. So here are the 5 Spanish vowels with blue ovals, and then the 12 English vowels with red font. And there you can see that almost all of the Spanish vowels, the area in which they're spoken in or their area of pronunciation, articulation, that there's 2 English vowels for each Spanish vowel. And at the bottom, there's actually 1 Spanish vowel and about 4 English vowels. You can see a dark line just went around the high front vowels because that's going to be the focus of today's presentation. The difference with beat and bit, and then to the E and piso. Okay, so of these high front vowels in Spanish, the one high front vowel phoneme is like in pico, and I describe it to my students as it being tense, short, and staccato, pico. And it takes up that whole area. Whatever a Spanish speaker hears that is articulated in that area, Spanish speakers will hear that as an E of their language. English, we have 2 high front vowel phonemes, the E in American English, which is gliding. So it's a high front tense. My muscles are tense. The vowel is longer. My tongue is gliding, and the tenseness produces a smile, the smiley sound. Beat. And the I is high front, but lax. The muscles are lax. It's very short. It's static. In other words, once the tongue reaches it, it doesn't keep moving to lengthen the vowel. And since the E in beat is the smiley sound, then we refer to the I in bit as the sad sound. And there we see the pico compared to beat bit. And what are some tips to help Spanish speakers overcome this challenge and be able to produce and perceive these vowels? First of all, we teach them to say smile, say cheese. When they're doing that, they're making the smile and the tenseness that is needed for saying beat. Look in the mirror or in their selfie, or the selfie on their cell phone, and they can see the smile, cheese, beat, and then bit. And then place the hands on their cheek, beat, bit. You can actually feel it. And I can actually see a person if they're saying it. So if I have students that instead of saying beat, they said bit, and I'll just point right here. And then my English learners will go, oh yeah, I had to go, and I had to make a smile. So if I start with pico as something they go, no, and go pico, and okay, now let's make it longer and glided and tense and tenser, and then go beat. So pico, beat, beat. And then for the bit, go pico, and then bit, and then shorter and bit. Or I can say the word si, and then go longer, si, seat, and si, sit, sit, and make it shorter. So going from the known to the unknown. So in the Spanish speaker's mind, there are 5 vowel phonemes. We're representing them here with 5 blue circles. And in the English speaker's mind, there are 12 vowel phonemes represented here with straight lines, either triangles or squares. So we have pico for the Spanish speaker in the high front. And we have for the English speaker beat and bit. Now we have a saying in English that you can't put a round peg in a square hole. So if we look at the Spanish verb, or the Spanish vowel as being represented by a round circle, and the English vowels is not being round, but being in triangles or boxes, and then one doesn't fit into the other. Even though some of the vowels might be somewhat similar, these are quite different because there's 1 and then there's 2. And if they don't say it quite right, if they don't, because that pico doesn't fit to the English, then instead of saying beach, they're going to be heard saying bitch. And that will indeed be sad. So if I look at the 5 circles in the Spanish speaker's mind, 5 areas, and in the English speaker's mind with the 12, how can I get a student to say beach? Because everybody likes going to the beach. It's a happy place, right? But sometimes the way they say it comes out with unhappy consequences. So for those of you who are listening to the English, continue listening to me instead of reading. There's sentences in English that will appear, but cognitively, if you just listen and watch what I'm doing, the concentration is better than trying to listen and read at the same time. So the English speaker will say beach. At the top right, you see number 1, beach. It's in the high front. Now the beach will enter into the Spanish speaker's ear. Here, the ear is represented by a type of funnel. So the sounds are going into the ear. Now, after it goes into the ear, it goes through an L1 Spanish filter. In other words, it gets filtered to be viewed. Now you can see it coming across, the sound came across as a number 3 and landed again in the high front, going through the Spanish filter. But when it did that, it wasn't heard as the E in beach. It was heard as the E in pico. It's heard short, pico, not beach. So now what happens? The Spanish speaker is heard as the E in pico. And the English speaker, usually the teacher, says, now repeat the word beach. And the Spanish speaker heard E in pico. So they're going to say it, but by producing the vowel E in pico, which is short. And short has nothing to do with the E in beach. It's a different characteristic. So the beach, pronounced with the Spanish vowel E by the English learner, will enter the native English speaker's ear. So now the ear, the diagram there of the funnel turned around, went in the other direction. And this time it's going to go through a filter again, but through the filter of a first L1 English. So whatever is spoken is going to be heard as English. So the Spanish speaker, even though he or she tried to say beach, it came out beach. It wasn't long enough. It wasn't glidey. It was intense. And consequently, the English speaker goes, wait a minute. Yeah, that's a high front vowel, but it wasn't beach, so it must be the other. And what is the other? The other is bitch. So even though the Spanish speaker had no intention of saying bitch, when pronouncing beach, it came out as bitch, which is a female dog, which if you're in the dog world and you go to a kennel show is okay. But the rest of the time, this is not an okay word to use in everyday conversation. So they turned something from being a happy place, beach, to being misunderstood when saying bitch. So remember, language learners hear the target or second language, L2, through the first language filter. And native speakers of the target language hear the learners through their own L1 filter. And if it's not the expected sound, they will hear the other. So if beach came out not long enough, not glided and not tense, but bitch, then they hear bitch, the other. The same way that when the word Mr. in English is said with a Spanish accent or by a Spanish-speaking English learner, they say Mister, but they didn't really say Mister, they said Mister with the Spanish vowel. So whenever a vowel is pronounced there, that isn't what the native speaker expected, they'll hear another sound. And the English language learners are only able to produce what they can hear. So how do we help them hear? Because their hearing isn't working yet. Well, in order to be able to hear challenging L2 sounds, language learners often need to know what is different. We have to explain it to them, demonstrate it to them. What's different about these L2 sounds? And then helping them learn to perceive the difference. And where does perception happen? It doesn't happen in the mouth and it doesn't happen in the ear. It happens in the brain. So it's the brain that we need to focus on. And with the brain and focusing on reasoning there and explaining and showing, then help with the hearing, the listening, and then we can get to the speaking. Here are my references, and I thank you very much.
We are live. Do you have any questions for us?